Howdy everyone, my name is Brittany Perrick. I am a geologist with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources Division of Geological Survey, and I'm here today to talk to you about a geologist toolkit. What I mean by that is an assortment of items that geologists can take with them in the field to do their jobs. This is basically things that I or my coworkers have used, and is not indicative of every geology position ever because there are a myriad of subdisciplines, and some of them don't even include fieldwork. So I'm going to walk you through what I've personally used and what my coworkers have used in our day-to-day jobs doing field work. Up first is something that is very site-specific because it involves going into mines or quarries. These locations require you to have PPE, which stands for Personal Protective Equipment. Starting from the top, we're going to put on our hard hat. This here is for protecting your noggin. Say there's falling debris, or you're in a mine and it's very low ceiling and you accidentally stand up a little too tall and you hit the hard hat instead of your head. Great for reducing impact to the old skull. We have earplugs for the very loud machinery that can happen in these tight spaces or on the quarry floor. Protect your ears and you won't have tinnitus later, hopefully. Up next are safety glasses. These are great for protecting your eyes and your eyewear for any kind of debris or dust. Moving down, we have next a high-vis vest, which is for, you guessed it, visibility. This is for when the people driving the huge machinery on a quarry or within a mine can see you. Because of the reflective nature, it also works if you're in the dark. And then we also wear these when we're doing work along busy roadways because it helps, drivers see us and to know to avoid us. And last but not least, you're always supposed to have steel-toed shoes on. I do not have mine because they're at the office. All right, so we're not going to visit a mine or quarry today, so we don't need to worry about that. But if you are going out, you're going to need something to put all of your stuff in. I'm talking bags. Everyone's bag needs are different. I only have a couple of examples here. It just depends on what you want and what you want to put in it. Up first, we have this sort of canvas messenger bag. This is great because it's very easy to get into. You've got pockets for your pens and tools and samples. It's got a hard back so your maps don't get too squished when you take them out. And this is good to just sling over your shoulder real quick or put it on your other shoulder if you're going a little bit further distance. I don't prefer to use this if I'm doing a lot of hiking just because only one shoulder bearing all the weight can become painful after a while. So what I like to use is my handy day pack. This thing is awesome because it can hold a lot of stuff, and then I can also put in a camelback so I can hydrate to my heart's content while I'm out in the field, and then also the side pockets can hold further water and specimens and whatever else I should need. I will say one thing I always have on hand is I always have sunscreen because I'm a very pale person and I get burnt very easily, and honestly, everybody should be wearing sunscreen because anyone can get burnt. I always have bug spray and I try to treat my clothes before I go out because the ticks in Ohio are incredibly bad. And then I always have snacks because a girl's gotta eat. And then of course, most importantly, is a first aid kit. Thankfully, I have never had to use this because there's never been an emergency or anything like that, but it's good to have on hand. I like to keep this one in my bag because it covers a lot of the bases. All right, so I figured out what bag I'm going to take with me, but where am I going? Thankfully, in the era of smartphones, it's very easy to navigate around the state. We can use our phones, we have GPS units, and we also have iPads that use an app called Field Maps that will help us navigate to where we're going and then also record our data for us. There's all sorts of maps on it. Primarily, we use the aerial imagery, or we can use topographic maps. So those are great to have on us, especially if we're driving or hiking to our spots. But in the event that your phone or your iPad dies, you want to have backup. So in order to be prepared for that eventuality, you should always have a little notebook on hand. This is great. It's just a little write in the rain, which means that when you use pencil and it rains on it, it won't smudge your writing. It has a inch measuring bar on the back, and then on the interior back cover, there is a centimeters one. Because of that, something like this makes a great use of scale. So when you're at a site and you're taking a picture of your outcrop or of a specimen, you need to be able to prove what size that item is. Not everyone's going to carry a ruler on them at all times, so something like this that is a known size is good to include in your photos. Got your notebook, and when you're out and you're taking notes in it, you're going to want to be able to describe what you're looking at to the best of your ability. And there are some tools that we can use to kind of standardize that methodology. So up first, we have a grain size chart, which is exactly what it sounds like. It comes with examples of different grain sizes from coarse to fine. This is the standard language for describing different grain sizes. The coarse, very coarse, medium, fine, all have measurements attached to them. And there's also a chart for sphericity. And because of the measurement bars on the side and the bottom, this is also a good thing to use for scale. Say I've got a rock, and I think that that rock is olive green. But someone else could come along and say, no, that's more of a puke green. And we're like, these are different colors to different people, because not everyone will describe a color the same way as somebody else. So we have this Munsell color chart that we can use to sort of standardize the way we talk about colors. So here is the color I was talking about. I think it's a beautiful green. It's called light olive, but the code that you would want to write down is 10Y5/4. And this helps anyone to know exactly what color you were talking about. Another thing to help you describe what you're looking at is to be able to look at it very up close. So here I have two items. They are both hand lenses of different magnifications. They're also called jeweler's loupes. So here, this one is 10 times. And then I believe this is 8 and 20, but it is long worn off. These are great to have on hand and really help when you're trying to describe the finer grains of stuff. Another thing that is very useful that I have used a lot in my field work is hydrochloric acid. This is a weak dilution of that acid, but what happens is that when you apply this to a rock, if it is limestone or dolostone, it will fizz. And that's because there's been a chemical reaction with the acid and the calcium in the rock. You can also apply this, to any rock to figure out if there's any calcium. So say you have a sandstone and you apply it and it doesn't fizz. That's fine, no calcium. But if it does fizz, that can mean that there is a calcium-rich matrix that's holding all of the grains together. And now that you've dissolved the matrix, you can use your grain size chart to figure out what size they are. So you're at your rock crop and you want to collect samples also. You're not going to toss those in the bottom of your bag and have them roll around creating a mess. What you're going to want to do is take vigorous notes about these samples also. So we have a sample bag here that is a little fancy because it has an actual tag attached to it. And you can use this, you can fill out site number, date, location data, and what unit you think you're in, what sample number for this site that it is, however specific you want to get about your data, because it'll help you in the long run. Because you might think that you will remember where you collected a certain sample at a certain location, but if you don't visit this data until 3-4 weeks later, you will forget, and you will wish you had taken better notes. Another thing that's useful to have on hand is I always have a pocket knife with me. This is great for testing hardness of some things because a knife will be able to scratch things that are a hardness of 7 or lower. And this is also good for if you want to pry a rock like out of an outcrop, and it's a very thin bed. You can try to get in there with that. And then if that's not cutting it, you bring in the big guns. This is a rock hammer, and it's called that or a mason's hammer because of the flat smashing bit, and then this pick end that is used for breaking, chipping, or prying apart. So if your knife's not cutting it for trying to get, a bed pulled apart, you can try to wedge that in there and then use it to get your sample. And while you're doing all of this, it's always good to have gloves on hand. Because if there's, sometimes there's black widows in outcrops, there's poison ivy, some of these rocks can be very sharp. Maybe you just did your nails and you don't want them to chip. It's good to have gloves. I wear gloves all the time. Very useful. Something that is really useful to me personally when I do my field work, because I go out and I look for sinkholes, is this plumb. It is an incredibly fancy instrument of a weight on a string. So I have this marked and measured off every 2 feet, so that when I encounter a sinkhole and there's a drain in the bottom that I can then measure, I will toss this in the hole, and as I pull it out, I can get a measurement of what I think it is. It's also useful for measuring the width and then the length of said sinkholes. Last but not least is this thing called a Brunton compass, which geologists use in the field to measure the strike and dip of faults, joints, or bedding planes. By that I mean the strike is the way that this planar feature interacts with the horizontal plane, and the dip is the angle at which the feature is inclined and is perpendicular to the strike. Fortunately or unfortunately, Ohio's geology is fairly flat, so we don't have to use a Brunton as often as some would like, though it is still good to know how to use and bring in the field on occasion. That's just a little insight to some of the tools geologists can use to conduct their fieldwork. For more information on Ohio's geology, you can visit us at ohiogeology.com or on Facebook as the Ohio Geological Survey. I'll see you in the field.